Hey, everybody. I've been mulling this news that happened this morning regarding the departure of Benioff and Weiss from Lucasfilm. And normally I only talk about, current movie news on rare occasions. But I ran an errand this morning and I was noodling on this whole thing because I started to see patterns in the pigeons. And I felt like there's sort of an epidemic problem. Not at Lucasfilm specifically. As a matter of fact, I think it's something that needs to be addressed with the film industry. And I'm really embarrassed to say that it has a lot to do, for some reason, with people in my generation as filmmakers. I feel like the whole reality bites philosophy of Generation X has negatively impacted our generation of filmmakers. I'm not really sure why, but my first reaction, just to kind of put this in context, my first reaction was like a lot of people's reaction, which was, oh, here we go again. Lucasfilm messed up again because Lucasfilm is dysfunctional and Lucasfilm is in chaos, and that's why they lost another set of directors. And then Melinda pinged me. And she said, hey, I found out some more information about this. Apparently yesterday they were at some sort of film festival and they were on a panel presentation, and they made some rather controversial or revealing statements about their own work philosophy as it related to Game of Thrones, but also genre filmmaking. So just to sort of pull the quotes that I can. I have some notes here. They were talking about how they didn't know what they were doing when they secured the pitch to adapt Game of Thrones. And down to they didn't even know how to talk to the costume department. They weren't even writing the scripts the right way to get the right characters in the right scenes. So they were having to go back and shoot 100 extra minutes of footage for the first season or something just to get two characters in a scene together because they missed that. And specifically regarding special effects and their approach to what is a fantasy novel series, they said, we didn't just want to appeal to that type of fan. And I hate to use air quotes, but that type of fan. It says here they wanted to expand the fan base beyond to people beyond the fantasy fan base, to quote mothers and NFL players. So they admit that they didn't know what they were doing, and they admit that they were pandering, and they also admit they knew nothing about fantasy and weren't that into it. They were just trying to win the pitch and then do the show, which. And again, I'll come back to this in a second, but we sit here in the era of reboots and reimaginings and sequels, far-flung sequels, and we forget that, barring a few random productions like Flash Gordon or Buck Rogers, which were spurred on by the ones I'm about to mention. The Star Wars, the Dark Crystal, the Indiana Jones, the Terminators, the Alien, all that kind of stuff, the Predator. All of those things at the time were new ideas. They might have been adapted from books or short stories, but as far as film was concerned, that was their first time on film. And in the case of Star Wars and Indiana Jones, they were inspired ideas. You could reach and say these were original ideas. And certainly they were original in the combination of elements put together. No one had made that specific soup before. So they had made those films originally. And so George Lucas and creators like Jim Henson were championing fresh ideas. They were not championing a reimagining or an adaptation or a sequel or a reboot. They were championing their own ideas. And I think that's really important to hold on to as we move into some of this further. But, Benioff and Weiss here have confessed that not only do they not want or respect genre fans, but what they're really targeting are jocks and soccer moms. That's who they want. They want people who, and this is what sounds so appealing to a corporate studio boardroom is, we want a broader audience. We want to appeal to Joe Sixpack. We want to appeal to everybody. Well, as I've stated in some discussions I've had online with some people, if you take that philosophy with every property you acquire and you get to something like Star Wars or Superman or something like that, and you start saying, well, we need a broader audience, it's like, you don't really get a broader audience than what Star Wars already had before Disney bought it. That to say, I'm not about to go into a deep dive on Star Wars and its fandom or anything like that. I only bring that up to say this is where the boardroom, the corporate mentality starts to break things from the very beginning. They start to break things because they're already under the assumption that the reason we've acquired this is to improve upon it, even though we bought it because it was already so great. You see, corporations very rarely, especially entertainment companies, they don't go out and buy crappy properties. They want the surefire bets. They don't want to remake Mac and Me. They want to remake E.T., twisted as it sounds. They want a new Back to the Future. They don't want a new Life Force. They don't want a new Ninja 3. They want a new Star Wars. So Benioff and Weiss didn't know what they were doing on Game of Thrones. And when I heard that, when Melinda sent me that information, which happened yesterday, these statements were made yesterday, now there's the theory that Lucasfilm and Disney were like, whoa, yeah, we can't have that. So either quit or we're going to fire you, which is a prevailing theory that's starting to ramp up right now. That's not even what I want to talk about. I'm trying to set the stage here because where I got to in my head was, okay, let's say that they didn't know what they were doing and they didn't want the fans. They wanted Joe Sixpack. Because as an aside, my brother was a massive fan of the Game of Thrones books for years before there was ever even the hint of a TV show. And when he watched the first season, he called me and told me how disappointed he was because it was so bare bones and so lackluster. Largely because in this admission from yesterday, Benioff and Weiss admitted they didn't even want to do special effects until maybe I think they said season 4 or season 3 because they didn't know how to do them. And they weren't sure what they wanted to do. So they kept all the fantasy elements out of this fantasy series. It's pretty damning content from them. And so when I was sitting here noodling on this, I thought, well, wait a second. All right, so maybe they didn't know what they were doing. And or maybe Disney didn't know that about them properly before they hired them. But here's my question. Why is it now, in this day and age, that these types of people and these types of pitches, in other words, these types of creatives, because it's not just Benioff and Weiss, there have been a spate of them over the last half decade. They're the ones that are getting through the corporate gatekeepers. They're the ones that are winning the pitches. They're the ones that are appealing to these corporate boardroom types. And I don't know if it's because they are apathetic or full-on snarky toward nerds, or they assert that they're gonna make this weird stuff normal or cool or whatever buzzwords they're using. But whatever they're doing, corporate Hollywood is picking the exact wrong people for all of these projects. And you would think with this much money on the line that they would want the exact right people. But that just goes to show you how dysfunctional corporate minds are, because they don't even know what they want, let alone what to pick, let alone what direction to set the ship in. They have no idea what makes a creative thing successful. Because for decades now, slowly but surely, creatives have been forced out of leadership positions in Hollywood, and Hollywood has been acquired and hostile takeovered and pulled into a conglomerate until all the studios are no longer independent. And now they're all run by accountants and businessmen and people that don't know anything about Hollywood. They're scared of original ideas. They want a sure thing, even though those sure things have all been played out. I mean, you look at Terminator, Alien, Predator, RoboCop, those franchises, they keep attempting a reboot on them. Well, all those franchises were done after 2 movies. And they just keep trying to defibrillate that zombie and bring it back, and it just keeps face planting again, just boop, boop, boop. But they don't have any confidence in original ideas. So they keep doing this kind of stuff. And just to prove my point, you look back at some of the quotes from a lot of these filmmakers over the years about their various projects and creative philosophies, and it's stunning that they were ever given the director's chair to begin with. You go back to Zack Snyder when he was just on the Watchmen and about to jump off and do Man of Steel. He got done with the Watchmen, and then I think he did Sucker Punch, or I can't remember which order those 2 films were in, but he was on the verge of doing Man of Steel, and he said, quote, "I had a buddy who tried to get me into normal comic books, but I was all like, no one is having sex or killing each other. This isn't really doing it for me." Now that sounds fine for The Watchmen, but do you really sit there and go, oh, that's our Superman guy right there? No, you don't, if you know anything about what you're doing. But the Tom Rothmans of the world and the Kathleen Kennedys, they don't know what they're doing from a corporate mindset and a creative mindset, and they're risk averse. And all they know is that guy made a movie that was a hit, give him this movie and he'll make it a hit too. And it's like, not if he has the wrong worldview, he won't. I mean, Patty Jenkins had the right worldview for Wonder Woman. That's why that movie did well in the midst of the DC universe drama. But what a fight it took probably to get that to where it was, with Snyder still influencing parts of it. It's a miracle, honestly. And it really shouldn't be that hard anymore. I mean, you've got the source material, you've got the resources, you've got the rights. You should know how to do this, especially after decades and decades of movie making. And numbers to follow and trends and history, but you don't, because you're still in corporate mode and you're doing this. Rian Johnson. I would be worried if everybody across the board was like, yeah, it was a good movie. It's much more exciting to me when you get a group of people who are coming up to you who are really excited about it, and then there are other people who walk out literally saying it's the worst movie I've ever seen. Having those 2 extremes is the mark of the type of movie that I want to make. I don't understand why a corporate boardroom is hiring a person like that. And the thing is, I know that they're going to say, well, we didn't know he said that back then in film school. And that's probably true. But the personality comes across. These personalities are their personalities, regardless of the literal quotes they say in the pitch versus what they've said in the past. There is something about their inherent personalities that is toxic to these genre movies, but is appealing to the people who greenlight the projects. And so we're in a perfect storm of dysfunction at this point. I will go on. J.J. Abrams was working on Star Trek in 2009. Star Trek always felt like a silly, campy thing. I remember appreciating it, but feeling like I didn't get it. I felt like it didn't give me a way in. There was a captain, a first officer, they were talking a lot about adventures, and not having them as much as I would have liked. Maybe I wasn't smart enough. Maybe I wasn't old enough. No, you weren't smart enough, JJ. And the things you liked about Star Wars that you applied to Star Trek also showed what you valued in Star Wars, which is largely why where we are now with that too. He's made statements lately that he says he's not going to fix The Last Jedi. He is not in the business of repairing The Last Jedi. Well, I don't doubt him, because I don't think he has the skill to do it. He's already proven that film after film after film after film. And yet he's been given the keys again. Taika Waititi. I'll ruin your mythos in a minute, baby. Now, I'm not one of the people that had immense hate for Thor Ragnarok. I didn't hate the movie. I will say that on repeat viewings, it doesn't quite hold up like it did on the first screening. I completely cop to that. It's not holding up like I would have hoped. I was admittedly vastly entertained the first time I saw it. I really was. But it is not holding up upon repeat viewings. And I understand why people are mad at that movie for sort of cutting Thor off at the knees as a character and as he rolls out in Endgame. I understand the criticism. I'm not completely one-to-one with the people who, are hating on that right now, but I do understand where they're coming from. And I can see how they can say the writing is on the wall here now with Thor, Love and Thunder, or whatever it's called, coming out. And then with the director making these kind of statements, it does beg the question, why are the Tom Rothmans, the Kathleen Kennedys in these, ivory towers in Hollywood, why are they championing and emboldening these nihilistic filmmakers? Because they are nihilistic. At best, they're inept and clueless. I mean, oftentimes it seems like they come off like guys that were nerds in high school, of which I was one. I'm not stepping away from that. But they desperately want to be cool and seen as cool. And so they're still trying to do the things that they think will make them cool and make their movies cool. Or in the case of Benioff and Weiss, they just seem like guys who were already too cool for school. And they just wanted to get into genre filmmaking because, I don't know, they thought it would get them women or something. I honestly don't know. But I know that they're not treating these things with the respect that they should be given. I mean, look at how Game of Thrones Season 8 just collapsed in on itself. That's not me saying that. That's the fans. I mean, a lot of people were disappointed by that. And more people with each subsequent Star Wars movie are disappointed. Star Trek is in a tailspin right now. I mean, Marvel's doing all right. We'll see what happens on Phase 4. I think it's Phase 4. But we don't know. What I'm trying to get at here is that there seems to be a systemic issue with the type of people that they are putting in the director's chair, and also given a lot of script control. And these guys, almost to a person, are either too cool for school or they desperately want to be too cool for school. Like, remember when Damon Lindelof came out and apologized for the gratuitous underwear scene in Star Trek Into Darkness? I mean, he apologized for it and backed off of it. And the reason he did was because he had to admit that he didn't even know why he put it in there. And it's like, well, yeah, we kind of do know why you put it in there. You put it in there because you probably thought at the time that it was pretty neat. But it really didn't serve a purpose, and then you got called out on it because it was weird. Like, it was a shoehorn, at best. And it really was like, whoa, it wasn't organically put in the movie. Like, nobody complained in the first Star Trek reboot when there was the scene with the green girl and Uhura comes in and doesn't know that Kirk is in the room and all that kind of stuff. Was it cheesecake? It absolutely was. But was it contextual? Yeah, a little bit. It was still cheap a little bit, but at least this was, my point in saying that is, these guys don't know what they're doing and they don't know why they're doing the things they do. And they're all from my generation. I'm not going to sit here and dodge this. These guys are almost to a person all Gen X. And I don't know if the pervasive marketing of our past just broke them and they didn't know how to move forward, or if they were just all the wrong people that got ahead of everybody else that was able to do this right. You know, they pushed past everybody else and knocked everybody else over to get to the front of the line. But they are not in it for the right reasons. And they are not interested, clearly, in delivering the respect to these franchises. At worst. At best, they're just inept and have bad ideas. But I would love to know how these guys are winning over every suit in Hollywood. I would really love to know that. Because after the other, you know, especially in the case of Lucasfilm, where they've already had just a slew of, you know, Josh Tranks and Rian Johnsons, and, you know, it runs the gamut of catastrophe. And it makes you wonder, were the people they kicked out of those directors' chairs, were they actually doing a bad job, or would have? Is Gareth Edwards' cut of Rogue One actually terrible? I never did think so. As a matter of fact, I feel like it's the war movie that we were promised and then didn't get. And I wonder, because I just recently watched Solo, I wonder what the Lord and Miller Solo might have been like. Maybe it would have been a disaster, or maybe it wouldn't have if this is the kind of decision-making that they're doing, because they greenlit Last Jedi at the expense of Colin Trevorrow, who said, I'm not going to do this. Now, Colin Trevorrow, I mean, my vote's still out on whether or not he's a stellar filmmaker, but at least from his comments, it sounds like his heart is in the right place when it comes to Star Wars. And, you know, he didn't want any part of where the story was going to roll off of Last Jedi and said, I'm out. Yeah, I'd really love to know why the juice is worth the squeeze here when it comes to these creatives. And I know I've talked for a real long time, but I just, it doesn't make any sense to me. So anyway, I'm finishing up the Halloween video. I'm working on that. That'll be launching on Patreon tomorrow, and it'll be going up wide on YouTube here on Thursday. So you'll be seeing that on Halloween on the 31st. And I'm working on the other videos like I've talked about, Robotech and Doctor Who Part 2 and all that kind of stuff. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, I'm at a point with Hollywood where I'm seeing a pattern of personalities that are causing these issues. There's a similarity there. It's like they've taken the GenX reality bites philosophy way too far. They've gone way too, you know, Bender from Breakfast Club, but without any real world experiences. It's all just them trying to be clever. And it's really breaking a lot of things, causing a lot of franchise and mythos damage to some of these stories. So yeah, I just don't understand it. So if you guys have any theories about why these types of people are the ones that are getting through the ranks, what is it about their personalities that's winning them the pitch, even though they can't actually step up to bat and hit the ball, to use a sports analogy? These wannabe jocks, these guys that, you know, they're just not sticking the landing, but they certainly know how to get on the team. But thanks for watching this, guys, and I'll see you on the next video.